If you're looking to learn how to weld, well, this is most definitely not the place you should be. I've been doing this for a couple of years now, just as a home gamer and occasionally at weekends, so I've absolutely no business telling anybody else how they should be doing it. On the other hand, if you're looking to see how a beginner's put together a welding bench that seems good enough for the job, well, you never know, you might get something out of this video. The idea is that I'll be able to pull the workbench out from the wall, spin it around the garage, and let me gain access to whatever I'm trying to weld. So I've cut some plates. I'm going to weld bolts onto the bottom of those plates, and then those plates will form the bottom of the legs, and I can screw the casters into the bolts. I'm using the TIG torch to attach the bolts, and even after I've been practicing this for maybe 2 or 3 years, I'm still not finding TIG that easy. I think I'm still dipping the tungsten a few too many times, and there's still a little bit of undercut in the welds, but it's getting better. There seems to be a vast amount of videos on YouTube all teaching you how to make welding tables. They all seem to involve the need for having a welding table that's even bigger than the one you're trying to make. The idea being that you build your smaller welding table on the flat surface of the bigger welding table, which is not really that helpful, is it, if you're trying to build it on your own in your garage. To get around that, I've milled some flat surfaces on some angle iron and some steel bar. I've welded it all together into a 90 degrees bracket using an engineer's square, and then I can clamp the box section to it, and that guarantees everything is at right angles. Which is easy enough for me to say, because I happen to have a milling machine, but if you haven't got one of those, well, I don't know, maybe you can figure out some other way of doing it, or maybe you can buy the jigs. Now, a couple of years ago, when I first bought my TIG machine, I did put together a very small welding bench, I think only about 1.5 foot by 1.5 foot, but it was a bit wobbly, it was a bit bent, but it was good enough for what I was wanting to do. But the other thing it taught me is that a TIG machine is not the process, at least in my opinion, for putting together box section. A MIG welder is just so much quicker. Now, it's actually that small workbench that I made a couple of years ago that you saw in the opening shots from this video. It was great for practicing TIG, running a few beads, starting to get the hang of things, but now I've bought the MIG welder, I want to make some things that are a little bit bigger, and hence I want a bigger workbench, and actually I'd like to do a better job of it. A good bit of advice I seem to pick up from the videos made by people that actually know what they're doing is just tack weld everything in place first. Then, when you've got everything assembled, you can run the full weld beads. That means if things don't quite fit, you've got a bit of wriggle room just to bend things into shape. Seems to make sense, and it seemed to work for me. I rather like these shots, although this one isn't quite as dramatic as it seems. With a bit of zoom, I did actually still have a working camera at the end of it. When you buy hot rolled steel, it comes covered in something called mill scale. It's very hard, and it's not conductive to electricity, and it's really difficult to get off. And a quick visit to either Google or YouTube seems to say that all you have to do is cover the steel with something called muriatic acid, and that will dissolve the mill scale without any bother. But of course, muriatic acid, well, that's just another name for hydrochloric acid, and I don't know, covering the entire garage in hydrochloric acid and getting the stuff everywhere doesn't seem like a great idea to me. With that in mind, I've gone for the user-friendly citric acid. It actually worked really well. I've poured it over paper towels on top of the tabletop, and then the mill scale, it came off really easily, just with light use of a flap disc and a scrubbing brush. Citric acid isn't going to do you any major harm, and it took probably about an hour of soaking with the paper towels. To attach the tabletop, I've actually welded tabs onto the steel sheet, and then those tabs are bolted into the frame. And the idea of that is it means I can get the tabletop on and off. Looking around on the forums, people seem to be recommending anything up to about 1 inch thick for the tabletop, the idea being that it won't warp when it gets hot. The thing is, if I make the tabletop 1 inch thick, that means it's also going to end up weighing about 140 kilos, and there's no way that I can manage that by myself. But given this is for relatively light use, occasional use, I've actually just gone for 1/4 inch, hopefully that'll be fine. I'm actually really pleased with the way this has turned out. It seems nice and solid, and it's easy to manoeuvre so I can gain access to all sides of what I'm trying to weld. Well, the steel worktop is brilliant for welding, but actually for anything else it's pretty cold and unforgiving and just generally noisy and horrible, and the wooden surface top is much nicer. So I've bought a sheet of plywood. I can bolt on my vise, I can lower the locking feet, that makes it nice and sturdy so it won't roll around, and then I'm back to a normal workbench. So thanks for watching. As I say, it's not meant to be instructive or educational, but if you're a beginner like me and you fancy making a welding bench, well, maybe it gave you a few ideas.